Lynn, the next question comes from a Mexican congressman. He is from the opposition party, the PRD. And his question to you is this. He says, Mr. LaRouche, do you think that nuclear energy is the only thing that can help countries as a source of energy? Or could it be nuclear in combination with other kinds of energy? Right now, nuclear energy is not being discussed for Mexico. No one seems to be talking about it. But we think that it's a very good idea and a very good alternative for, among other reasons, the fact that it produces large amounts of energy without having any negative effect on climate change.
Don't worry about climate change. Think about dollars. It's not change, it's dollars that count. No, look, we went through this in Mexico in the period of the 1970s and early 1980s. I was personally involved with Lopez Portillo and other people which made an attempted revolution to save Mexico in 1982. We would have saved Mexico if we'd been allowed to. Since the end of the Lopez Portillo government, that October, with his swan song at the United Nations, Mexico has been going continuously downhill ever since, from worse to worser, and worstest. Now, what were the plans, which were not necessarily Lopez Portillo's plans for economic policy for Mexico pertaining to nuclear power, which are relevant? Well, first of all, as you know, the most accessible areas of Mexico are along the coastlines, naturally. And therefore, you would tend to say, well, why, if you want to have an efficient economy, you've got to move the people out of the Dust Bowl or the Smoke Bowl, which is Mexico City area. You know, you sit up there, years ago even, it's worse today, you sit up there and in the morning, the filth is down. So you can get up on the second story or third story, you can breathe air. Down lower, it's more difficult. By afternoon and evening, everybody is struggling. And it's not fit to live in. And yet the people of Mexico, the population keeps concentrating, coming into this great bowl in this mountainous area, more and more population, suffocating and living poorer and poorer standards with less and less productivity, actual physical productivity. When you have all this territory of Mexico, most of which is left undeveloped. I mean, it's a territory which is useful. For example, the Mexicans for many years have had this policy of these canals along the coastline of Mexico. Right? The coastline to canals was freshwater canals. Because the idea is you have the southern part of Mexico is rich in water, and the northern part is rather not so rich in water, much worse. There is no significant railway connection directly between Mexico City and major cities of the northern coast, such as... So therefore, what's wrong? The efforts are going in the wrong place. Now, the problem of going to the coastal areas, if you want to set up, it was planned then. Mexico had a plan for 10 nuclear centers of power production at that point. It was on the plans, it was ready to go. Well, the first thing is the temperature in some times of the day and certain times of the year is not so nice. Not nice for human beings. And it promotes siestas. You know what siestas may lead to? They may lead to sex. And and things like that. So therefore, you don't want too many siestas. You want people working. Well, this means climate control. Now, climate control has many features, which involve things like water. The best way to have natural climate control is to grow trees. So grow trees. Trees will tend to absorb 10% of the solar indicated radiation up to that level. grasses, poor policy, grasses and bushes 1 to 2% at maximum. So the first thing you want to do, you want to make a more habitable environment. And you don't want solar collectors, nor tax collectors. You want natural collectors, natural control of the environment by trees. Rip up those solar collectors. We need trees. Same thing. So therefore, we would then have, and you would have in buildings and structures, you would have air conditioning in addition to trees. You build forested areas. You have every place you can, you have a tree. You want nice climate control? Have a tree, as many trees as you can get. Find the best ones for this purpose. They're nice anyway to have. They give it, So anyway, so get that. Now you take in areas of work, you control air conditioning. You have water purification. Suddenly, Mexico, areas that are considered unfavorable by sufficient water and sufficient power, because you can handle the power more easily and more profitably along the coastlines than you can in the desert in the interior. Of course, the objective is not to offend the deserts, but to eliminate them. But that's not to offend them, because deserts aren't people. They don't have feelings. Trees may have feelings, but not deserts. So therefore, you want to transform a desert area into a rich area of habitation and so forth. So now you use the areas which are the most profitable in terms of energy policy to develop habitable areas for the Mexicans to get the hell out of that bowl of breathing that stuff they have to breathe every day in Mexico City. Move them out into areas where there's employment, there are decent environmental living conditions, and use the areas which are cheapest for getting this effect because of transportation factors and so forth, and use that to develop the inland desert areas as areas of suitable for habitation. Because the Mexican population has, despite all methods to the contrary, has shown a tendency to increase. I don't know what it is they do, but they do something that they increase their population. Maybe it's a lack of employment. Maybe if they were producing other things, they wouldn't be producing any babies. Right? But anyway, that being the case, that's the point. The point is, you have to have a policy. You have to have a sort of a love of a country, as I do for Mexico. I've been there enough to and so forth to get a certain love of the country. So you want the country, like a beloved friend, to prosper. And you want them to not to have these deprivations of undeveloped areas where poor people are starving and suffering with diseases and so forth in undeveloped areas. And that's the policy. The only reason Mexico didn't improve as Lopez Portillo intended in 1982, there's one reason. The British and the Americans said no. They said, starve. We don't like you to get too rich. You get too uppity. We don't like that. Mexicans tend to be insolent. We don't like that. You want to have something? You want to work? Go to the United States. You work for nothing? But don't worry, you got work. Huh? Don't complain, you got work. That's the policy, isn't it? Why adapt to that? Why don't we recognize that we as nations, such as Mexico, have an interest in developing the minds of people? Don't we feel ashamed every time we see people dying in poverty in some part of the world, where the poverty is something we've helped to foster because we support policies which do that? Why don't we just coalesce and combine the forces of patriots of various nations to a common cause, to say that we have the technologies available to us to begin to make things better? And why don't we just do that? And let each do it their own way. But let them be smart and also do a little bit of consulting about what's smart to do. That's all. That's the problem. The solution is that. Mexico, what did after the defeat of Lopez Portillo, Mexicans became cowardly. It's like that. I can tell you that as of, say, August of 1982, we had a cadre of the organic leadership of Mexico, which was already engaged in a commitment to a program which would have succeeded mightily and would have changed the entire hemisphere from the north, from Canada, all the way to the tip of the southern tip of South America. We had it. We had an agreement among Lopez Portillo, among the president of Brazil, among the government of Argentina, and others, to implement a program which I designed. It would have worked just fine. But this came in the period of following the Malvinas War, which the British Empire and a bunch of British butt kissers in the administration prevented the proper action being taken. The United States should have kicked the British out of there. We didn't do it. But anyway, so therefore these political failures, and what happens is people tend to respond to a political failure as if it were a law of nature. We don't dare do that. We don't dare really get insolent about nuclear power in Mexico because we got our fingers burned once for trying it. And therefore, can't we compromise so the enemy doesn't get too upset? And then we lose. I think the world and the state now, that I'm ready to go to war on this question. We're going to stop losing.